Hi everybody, my name is Mrs. Taylor. I'm with Studio Ace and I'm going to be your art teacher today. We're going to be doing a really fun project where we learn how to make our very own air dry clay. So we're going to be making clay that yes, will dry just by being out in the air, and we're going to be making a really fun, silly monster. Just to show you a couple of examples, this is a silly monster that I created without any color, and it's not completely dry, so it's a little soft, but you can see that it's starting to dry, so it's holding up. I also created a little hole so I can hang it on the wall if I would like. And then I have another one that's still really wet that needs a little bit more time drying that I used with my colored clay, and I also added a few toothpicks to make some silly teeth. So I hope you're excited for this project today. This is a very science meets art type of project, and the ingredients that you're going to be needing today are very simple. You're only going to need all-purpose white flour. Could be substitute with gluten-free flour if so needed. Definitely use white flour. I made the mistake of accidentally using bread flour once and it was so sticky it never dried. So make sure you get white flour, all-purpose. Some salt, comes in all different shaped bottles, but you can get it at the dollar store or the grocery store. And some food coloring. You can use any kind of food coloring. It can be gel, it can be liquid, and if you don't have food coloring, you can also use liquid watercolor paint. So if you have the kind of watercolor paint that's in little tubes, not in a tray, that works really well also. You can get this at the grocery store, the liquid kind. And the last thing that you will need is water. And to measure all of your items, you're going to need a measuring cup. This is also very important for this project. So make sure that you have something that measures, because having the correct measurement is really going to make or break whether this clay dries and isn't too sticky. The other items you're going to need today besides those ingredients and this tool is a bowl, some sort of mixing spoon or a spatula, and then also like a clean workspace, right? Somewhere where you can kind of make a little bit of a mess. I like to put down a garbage bag or a piece of newspaper or something like that to protect your table. And then something to build your sculpture on until it dries is really helpful too. This, if you can see on the back, is an old cereal box. So I already cut another piece kind of similar to this, which is on the back from an old cereal box. I love recycling and reusing items from my kitchen, but you can also just use regular cardboard, a piece of canvas, or something else that the clay is not going to stick to. So gather all of your materials together and let's get started. So now I've gathered all of my necessary materials to make my air dry clay. I have my bowl, I have something to mix it with, I have my food coloring, I have my flour, salt, and water. So I'm going to go ahead and measure out a half a cup of flour, which I already have. I'm going to start with that by putting that in the bowl. And then I'm going to measure out a quarter of a cup of water. So that's a 1/4. Some people say quarter. Some people say 1/4. Go ahead and pour that into my flour. And then I'm going to do the exact same measurement of salt. I'm going to have my 1/4 or 1/4 cup salt. So now I'm going to go ahead and take my spoon or my spatula, and I'm going to start combining my ingredients until it starts to get kind of clumpy. And at some point, you are going to have to start mixing it with your hands. So that's pretty clumpy. It's time for me to start mixing it with my hands, but I'm actually going to put gloves on because I'm going to be adding color. And the color from the food coloring can dye your hands. Now, if you don't have gloves, that's okay. Get mom or dad to help you. Gloves just helps so it doesn't stick to your skin. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to pick up all of this clay and I'm going to start kneading it, kind of smushing it together, squeezing it till it all starts to stick to itself. And you may find that it's still a little dry, so I have a lot of like little pieces kind of sticking in the bowl. If you find that it's not sticking together very well, just add a little bit more water. If it's too sticky, like it's sticking to your fingers and it's just like kind of making a bit of a mess, then add a little bit more flour. You can also kind of dip your hands in the flour to kind of help it not stick to your hands if you're not using gloves. All right, so you want to kind of squeeze it and smush it together until it's really can hold its own shape. This is great. Now, you have a couple of different options with the color. I did say you needed food coloring to get started, but that is if you want to make sure that your monster is in color right from the very beginning, which I think is a lot of fun, right? Because you can see all the little details of all the facial features. But maybe let's say you don't have food coloring or you want the ability to paint your monster. Then you could just leave it in its original clay color, which is kind of like a dirty white, off-white. And you could also make your monster just like this without any color added to it. Then you could paint directly onto this with watercolor paint or acrylic paint, or even use markers to decorate it. So you don't have to have food coloring. There are other ways to decorate a air-dried clay sculpture. So just wanted you to be aware of what is available to you. So I am going to color mine today because it's so much fun. So I'm going to go ahead and start dividing my clay into several different balls so I can add the color. So I'm just going to add, 1 drop of blue. Now this, this is where if you don't have gloves, you just want to make sure that when you add the color, the dye, that you kind of close it off. And that way you try not to get it on your fingers. And when you're kind of smushing it together, if you see the color starting to kind of poke out, then you can kind of push it back in with the clay. This will kind of help it not get on your fingers. So as you can see right now, I don't really have any color on my gloves, just a tiny bit. And you still will be able to change the color of the clay. Now, if you're wearing gloves, it doesn't matter. You can just go crazy and just start smushing it and kneading it until it changes color. If it comes out too light, then you just want to add more dye or more food coloring. So I'm going to add actually a little bit more. It really depends on the dye. I've used gel colors. Those can be a lot more vivid. I've used watercolors. That can be really vivid. It just depends on what you are adding to your clay. All right, so now I'm gonna get a nice light blue. Like I said, I'm just gonna keep pushing and pushing and kneading and smushing until I get some nice blue color. And I'm gonna do that to all of my clay until I have all the colors that I wanna start with today. So now I'm gonna go ahead and get the back of my cereal box. This is what I'm gonna be building my monster on. And I have several colored clays to work with. I have my primary colors, which is red, blue, and yellow. And then I went ahead and I broke off a little bit of my blue and yellow to create a secondary color, which is green. And I also took that big ball that I had set aside at the beginning and I added yellow and red to create another secondary color, which is orange. And this is going to be the face of my monster. So I made sure to keep the biggest piece off to the side for the background, the face. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to form a sphere or a ball. And now I'm going to start to kind of push it flat with my hands, ever so gently. And like I said, if your clay is sticking to your hands, right, almost like glue, then you definitely need more flour. So go ahead and go back to the first step and add some more flour until your clay is not sticking to your hands. All right, so now I have a nice round face. You could do a square face if you wanted to. It doesn't matter what shape, you do what you like. So I really like round faces. So here's going to be the face of my monster. And then you just have to decide, what do you want to add to your monster? He's supposed to be silly. Maybe he's kind of angry looking. It's really up to you. Maybe you don't feel like doing a monster at all. This is a silly monster clay project, but if you're not feeling like making a monster today, don't feel like you have to. I feel like with art, there's so many options that you should do something that feels good to you. So I've, in the past in my classroom, I've had students make an animal. So maybe you're not filling the monster, then turn it into a bear or a cat or a dog. But today I'm making a silly monster because I think they're so much fun. So I'm going to start off with making some eyes, and I think I'm going to choose yellow for my eyes. So I'm going to take 2 little pieces, and I'm going to try to make 2 balls that are about the same size. Now, some monsters have 6 eyes, some monsters have 3 eyes. Don't feel like your monster has to have 2 eyes. So once you have 2 balls that are exactly the same size, you can flatten them out. And if you just dip your finger in water and add a little bit to the back, it will stick really nicely. Just flatten it out, add a little bit of water to the back, stick it onto your monster. Sometimes your clay is already pretty sticky, so you don't need the water, but it's really helpful because that way they don't fall off. So I've got a 2-eyed monster. Maybe he has green eyes, he or she. Same thing, I'm going to make 2 little balls for the eyeballs. I'm going to go ahead and put that right there in the middle. I'm going to add just a touch of water just to make sure that it sticks. So I have green eyes. Very cute, very cute. Maybe I want him to have eyelashes. Maybe I want him to have eyelids. I could add that on. Maybe I want him to have a silly eyebrow or maybe a unibrow. If you wanted to make something like a really long eyebrow, you would create a coil with your clay. So you would kind of roll your clay back and forth until it created sort of a worm shape. And then depending on how long you want it, you could create kind of a silly unibrow with the worm. All right, now maybe he needs a nose. How about a red nose? Do all monsters have noses? Not necessarily. I'm just going to kind of pinch my clay together, add a little drop of water so it sticks. Not too much water because then it'll never dry. Oh my gosh, that's a very silly little pointy nose. Okay, now if you want to create a mouth that has these really fun toothpick shaped teeth, how I did that was I just grabbed a bunch of toothpicks from the kitchen and I wanted to keep just the pointy part. So I just used my fingers to kind of break off the end, and you can get your parents' help with this if you want. And I just made a bunch of teeth with a bunch of toothpicks. Okay, now I'm going to make the mouth. So I think I'm going to pick red, and I'm just going to pinch up a little bit. And then I'm going to start shaping my mouth into any shape that you want. It can be kind of an oval shape. You can try to make lips if you want. It's really up to you. I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to make, just to show you in kind of one approach, you can make a coil. You can rub it between your hands or on your board, and then you can start flattening it out. And hopefully it doesn't stick to your board. Sometimes it does. And then I can put that. Oh my gosh, look how long that mouth is. That might be too long. I'm going to go ahead and squish it back together. And I'm going to try to make kind of a mouth shape just by pinching it in between my fingers. And actually at this point I could probably take off my gloves if I wanted to, because I don't think I would dye my fingers at this point. See, there's a little bit of pink on the ends, but if you're at this stage after all your colors are mixed, you can usually take off your gloves, but it's up to you. So I'm just going to kind of shape my mouth. Doesn't look too bad. And then maybe flatten it. It was feeling pretty sticky, which is why I didn't add any water. It's pretty big, so I'm going to keep flattening. You can also grab a tool from the kitchen or a fork or anything that you have, and you can use that to create some texture. And just push down on the clay to make it a little bit flatter. I'm trying to kind of make it look like his lips. Okay, I think that's pretty good. So I just used a little skewer stick that I had in the kitchen. And then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to grab my little toothpick teeth. And I'm going to take off my gloves so it's a little bit easier to hold the toothpicks. And I'm just going to push them into the clay. my gosh, kind of looks like a vampire. So maybe 2 on the top, and then maybe I'll put like just a few on the bottom. Now you do not have to do the toothpick thing. This is just one option. I just thought it was really silly looking. Like on this one, I just used clay for the teeth. So now, some other things that I could add to this silly monster's face is maybe some hair. And if you wanted to create some interesting textures, this is just the end of a fork that I smushed down on the hair. And then I made some horns. And how to make the horns, let's see. How about green horns? I'm going to take 2. Take my other glove off now that I know the color's not coming off. And I'm going to make 2 round spheres or balls that are about the same size. And then I'm going to turn them into coils. But then I'm going to kind of push down on one side. So I make a coil, and then I just kind of push down on one end while I'm coiling so it gets skinnier. And then I add a little bit of water where I want to put the horn so it sticks. Whenever you're adding like hair or horns, you definitely want to use the water because they're kind of on the edge of your monster and you don't want them to fall off. So, and then you could kind of curl them any way you want. Maybe they're curled horns. Maybe they stick straight up. That one's kind of fun. So I'm going to make a coil. And then I'm going to push down on one end so it gets a little pointy or tapered. Add a little drop of water where I want to put the horn. Smush it down and then decide how I want it shaped. He's looking a little crazy now. I think maybe I'm going to use my toothpick or my skewer to make a little pupil. I think that'll kind of help with the eyes. And because I'm feeling like this monster's looking a little wild, I think I'm going to make some eyelids. So I'm just going to take a little bit of clay, kind of try to flatten it in between my fingers. And if that's too big, you can always use your skewer stick or your toothpick to kind of cut the clay if you're trying to get it a little bit smaller to fit. It may stick to your fingers, but that's okay. And then I could make an eyelid so he looks a little nicer. There we go. Maybe just one eyelid. Now he looks really silly. I could make his smile a little happier. There we go. Maybe I could add some hair. Maybe a little bit of blue hair again. Could do pigtails. Ooh, maybe a mohawk. Mohawks are fun. If your clay is sticky, the blue felt a little sticky. You don't need to add water again. So I'm going to add the hair on the top, and then I'm going to use my toothpick or my skewer, whichever one you have, and you can kind of add texture to the hair. You can also do this with a fork. You can also add to the hair by making little tiny coils. So make a really small coil, and then you can start. My blue is really sticky. You can add a little bit more on top. I might need to add a little bit more flour to this blue. I'm not sure why it's stickier. All right. And then I have a very, very silly, funny, crazy monster. And this is the one that I made earlier. And then if you decided to not add the color to the clay, you can also just have a off-white monster that you can end up painting later. And if you want to hang up your monster on the wall or make an ornament out of it, you can find a straw from your kitchen or anything that has kind of a hollow end. This has clay stuck in it right now. And you can just poke a hole with the straw. You can put it through the middle of the head, or you can put it on the sides as well, and then you can string it up when it's dry. Now, the best way to get this to dry is to set it in a sunny place, and then it'll dry in a few hours. All right, so that is our silly monster. Thank you so much for making art with me today. I hope you liked this project, and I will see you later.